Normandy, June 6, 1944. A date carved in blood and salt. Imagine the scene through the eyes of a standard infantryman. You are cold. You are terrified. Your stomach is a knot of seasickness and pure, unadulterated dread. The metal ramp of the landing craft is the only thing between you and a wall of German lead. You expect the smell of cordite. You expect the screams of the dying. What you do not expect, what no sane man could prepare for, is the sound of bagpipes. High, screeching, and defiant, it is the Highland laddie. It is the sound of the Scottish Highlands echoing across the French coast. And there, standing on the landing craft Assault 197, is Jack Churchill. He isn't crouching. He isn't seeking cover. He is playing his pipes as if he were at a wedding, not a massacre. As the ramp falls, he doesn't reach for a rifle. He unsheathed a heavy, double-edged Claymore sword. He leaps into the waist-deep water, the pipes wailing, the blade gleaming under a leaden sky. This was not a scene from a movie. This was the reality of Sword Beach. To understand Mad Jack, you have to dismantle the modern concept of a soldier. We are taught that war is a clinical affair of logistics and long-range ballistics. Jack Churchill saw war as a spiritual arena. He was a man born centuries too late, a Viking soul trapped in a world of combustion engines and radio waves. He didn't just reject the 20th century, he declared war on it. His philosophy was simple. A soldier's strength is not in his weapon, but in the terror he inspires. And nothing inspires more terror than a man who brings a sword to a gunfight and smiles while doing it. But before the sands of Normandy, there was the village of L'Épinette. 1940. The British Expeditionary Force is in a desperate retreat toward Dunkirk. The German Blitzkrieg is a juggernaut, a mechanized beast crushing everything in its path. Most men are looking for a way out. Jack Churchill was looking for a vantage point. He climbed into a small granary, overlooking a road where a German patrol was advancing. He didn't have a sniper rifle. He had a Longbow, a weapon of the Middle Ages, a tool of Agincourt. Psychologically, this was a masterstroke of dark intent. A gunshot is expected. A gunshot is a noise that triggers a standard military response. But a longbow is silent. It is a ghost. Jack drew the heavy string back to his ear. He felt the tension of the wood, the same tension his ancestors felt 5 centuries prior. He released. The arrow hissed through the air, a silent predator. It struck the German sergeant squarely in the chest, pinning him to the spot. The patrol froze. They had no muzzle flash to aim at, no acoustic signature to track. Their leader was dead, killed by a piece of wood at a feather. In that moment, the German Third Reich, with all its tanks and planes, was humbled by a man with a medieval hobby. Jack's life was a series of these impossible vignettes. Between the wars, he didn't settle into a quiet life. He worked as a newspaper editor in Nairobi, but his soul was restless. He became a professional bagpiper. He represented Great Britain in the World Archery Championships. He even appeared as an extra in films like Ivanhoe because he was the only man who could ride a horse and shoot an arrow with authentic violence. He was training. Every moment of his life was a preparation for the great conflict. He wasn't playing a character, he was becoming the weapon. When the war finally broke out, Jack didn't just join the army, he joined the commandos. These were the elite, the shadows, the men sent where the survival rate was calculated in single digits. Jack excelled here because the commandos operated on the edge of the psychological abyss. During a raid on the Norwegian island of Vauxhall, Jack was once again in the lead. As the landing craft approached the shore, he didn't wait for the order to charge. He stood on the bow playing the March of the Cameron Men on his pipes. Then he threw a grenade and charged into the smoke with his sword drawn. This is where we must look at the dark psychology of his leadership. Why did men follow him? Because Jack Churchill made the impossible look like a game. He stripped away the technical complexity of modern death and replaced it with a raw, primal energy. If your commander is charging a machine gun nest with a sword, your own fear of a fusil seems small. He absorbed the collective dread of his unit and converted it into a frenzied kinetic momentum. He was a conductor of chaos, and the battlefield was his orchestra. By 1944, the legend of Mad Jack had reached a fever pitch. But even legends have their breaking points. Or do they? The island of Brock in the Adriatic Sea. Jack was leading a force of commandos and Yugoslav partisans against a heavily fortified German position on a hill known as Point 622. The mission was a meat grinder. Artillery rained down. The partisans, broken by the intensity of the fire, retreated. The commandos were whittled down until only 6 men remained. Then 3. Then it was only Jack. Most men would surrender. Most men would die. Jack Churchill did something else. He sat down. In the middle of a literal storm of mortar fire and lead, he took out his bagpipes. He began to play "Will Ye No Come Back Again," a song of mourning, a song of lost causes. He played until a German grenade knocked him unconscious. When the German soldiers reached the top of the hill, they found a lone man surrounded by the bodies of his comrades, clutching a set of pipes. They didn't kill him. Even the SS, in their clinical brutality, were struck by the sheer transcendental madness of the scene. They thought he was a relative of Winston Churchill. They thought they had captured a king. He was sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, a place designed to break the human spirit. But how do you break a man who doesn't acknowledge the rules of the century he lives in? Jack Churchill didn't see a prison, he saw a temporary inconvenience. He and an officer named James McGrath crawled under the wire, through a disused drain, and began walking toward the Baltic coast. They were captured, but the attempt alone terrified the guards. Jack was a virus in their system, a variable they couldn't calculate. Later transferred to a camp in Italy, he saw his chance when the power went out. He didn't hesitate, he simply walked away into the night. He didn't have a map, he didn't have a compass. He had a rusted tin of onions and the unshakable belief that he was the protagonist of history. He walked 150 miles across the Alps, surviving on raw vegetables and sheer willpower until he stumbled into an American armored column. His first question wasn't for food or water, it was to ask where the nearest battle was. But the war was ending. The Americans had dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world had entered the nuclear age. For Jack, this was a catastrophe, not because of the loss of life, but because the atomic bomb made the individual obsolete. It was a weapon of mass logistics, not of personal courage. He famously said, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. This isn't the statement of a warmonger, it's the statement of a man who found his only true home in the crucible of combat. Even in peace, Jack couldn't be tamed. He moved to Australia and became a surfing pioneer, being the first man to ride the 5-foot tidal bore of the River Severn on a board he designed himself. He would ride the train home, and as it passed his backyard, he would throw his heavy briefcase out the window so he wouldn't have to carry it from the station. People thought he was insane. Jack knew he was just being efficient. He had stripped away the social filters that make us civilized and lived as a pure expression of intent. Jack Churchill's legacy is a haunting question mark over the face of modern warfare. We live in an era of drones, of satellite strikes, of buttons pressed in air-conditioned rooms thousands of miles away. We have perfected the art of killing without looking. Jack Churchill represents the opposite. He represents the uncomfortable truth that war is a human endeavor, a visceral, bloody, and terrifying encounter between wills. He proved that a man with a sword, a bow, and a set of pipes could disrupt the most powerful military machines on Earth simply because he refused to be afraid. But as we close this chapter on Mad Jack, we have to look at the other side of the coin. For every Jack Churchill who survived, how many died in the first 5 seconds of the beach? And what happens when the madness isn't a choice, but a requirement? In our next journey, we will look at the psychological breaking point of the Eastern Front, where soldiers didn't just carry swords, they carried the weight of an entire ideology that demanded their total annihilation. The story of the Night Witches and the Soviet death cult is coming up. Jack Churchill was the last of the Vikings, but the world he left behind was becoming something much colder, much darker, and much more efficient. Did we lose something when we traded the Claymore to the cruise missile? Or did we just find a way to hide the madness? You decide.